moving into piano, and we've hit our first curveball of the session. I had every intention of just using the grand piano on this. I had a very specific mic setup that I had in mind that I've used for some immersive stuff. I had a part in my head that I was pretty sure was going to work, and none of it panned out. I had started out with the grand piano with a bunch of mics on it, tried the part, it was not working. And I think the problem was that the grand piano was just simply taking up way too much space for what ended up being a very, very simple part. One thing that I'm thinking about a lot as I move into this, and one reason I started with acoustic guitar, is that a lot of the bluegrass and acoustic music that I've heard mixed in Atmos, a lot of the acoustic instruments just seem really thin and bright to me. I don't know if it's just a trend or whatever. I don't know what the reason is, but whatever the reason is, I knew that when I did this song, I really wanted some thick, kind of smooth sounding acoustic guitars. So I started with those, and as you heard, I took up a lot of real estate, both sonically and image-wise. They're a bit on the dark side. I'll probably mix some brightness into them after the fact, but I wanted those acoustics to sound pretty thick. So when I had my thick, darker kawaii grand piano, it was just, I could tell I was starting to layer thick on thick, and, I was losing some clarity. The part wasn't working as well. And so at that point, I almost just decided to drop piano altogether. And then I thought, well, if this was a normal stereo session, I would usually just move to my little tiny piano. And this is a really unique piano. This is another older kawaii, but you'll usually see them called like Marco Polo pianos is usually what the name brand will be. But what it is it's a smaller grand piano tuned from, I think, A2 to C7. It's got 64 keys. When you start in the second register, all the strings are just single strings, and then when you get up higher, it's all doubles. So there's no 3-string combinations like you get on a bigger grand piano or normal upright pianos. This is almost like a una corda. I don't know if you've heard of those, where it's just 1-string upright pianos, but when you do get into the higher registers, there are pairs of strings on those. But all that to say, this is a very, very unique sounding piano. You're never going to hear another piano that sounds like this. It sounds a little bit lo-fi and cool. I try not to tune this very often because I think kind of the slightly out of tune honky tonk thing is just popular and a lot of people like it. So this is a vibey piano. We're leaning into the vibes. It's fairly in tune, but you'll hear some slight tuning issues, which I think just give it character. I'm an acoustic guitar player, so I kind of think of this as like the equivalent of a parlor guitar or just a cheaper, smaller sounding acoustic. But the coolest thing about this is that it's brighter and it has more attack and it doesn't have as much resonance and complex overtones. So this is going to punch through the mix a lot better. Think of it like all the considerations I had when we were recording the Nashville tuned acoustic. The grand piano was just taking up too much space and getting lost behind those darker acoustics. We needed something that was just going to sound a little bit different and punch through a lot better. And so when I moved from the grand piano to this, immediately is like, okay, this was the right decision. This is coming through so much better. It's going to leave a lot of room in the mix. I'm not sure how I'm going to mix this yet or how much space I want this to take up. So I think this was the perfect opportunity to show you what the Ambisonic Mic can do on its own, because in the acoustic guitar segment, I talked about the concept of kind of anchor and support and how I was using this as support. You have so much control over what you can do with this mic. I can dump it down to a mono mic in any polar pattern. I can dump it down to a stereo pair in XY or Bloomline or dual omni, or I can just spread it out slightly as an ambisonic signal and have a lot of control on how things sound and how much room it takes up. So I'm just going to use the Ambisonic mic on the upright piano. I'll give you an ambisonic binaural render of it so you can hear how it sounds, but when we get to the mix stage, things might change a lot. And again, the great thing about the Ambisonic mic is that it gives you a lot of leeway in post to really manipulate the signal and decide how you want to use it. So this was a perfect time to just use the Ambisonic mic. And then come mix time, we can really, get into it and decide how exactly we're going to treat this signal, because there's a lot of versatility built into how you can manipulate this in post. But let's just go ahead and hear it. It's a really simple part. I'll just give you a simple binaural render, and we'll move on to the next thing.